there's a big push on equity and the lens of like seeing, Black, African American, Hispanic, Latino presence, increased numbers in apprenticeship. And from the research we've done in terms of looking at some of the dynamics of journey worker in trade and the apprentices, did you encounter anything, or talk a little bit about through an equity lens what you experienced looking back?
So it's tough with line work, and I don't want to beat up on the system too much because
Right.
again, line work is something that most people in the inner city don't know about.
Mm.
So it's not like there's 50 white linemen and 50 black linemen and then no black instructors. There's a small pool of us, and then there's a larger amount of white men in this. And this is it's not I don't want to have like a victim
Of course.
mentality or approach to it, but it is what it is.
Right.
And sometimes we care about what we care about. We will prioritize somebody who looks like us. We will prioritize somebody from our culture, somebody we can resonate a little bit more. Not always in a negative way.
No, just instinctively, basically, just what we're used to.
So that's the importance of having um, an equal share,
Representation.
because it's okay for you to prioritize what you care about. But if we both have some equity in it, I can do the same as well.
Yeah.
And for me, I see no color in that spectrum at all,
Right.
because I just love the trade so much. It's the best man for the job. But I will give equal care to everybody.
Yeah.
But again, that's not something that everybody has interest in, or think about or prioritizes.
I think that's been a little bit of an emphasis on how to prepare an apprentice for success, but how to prepare a mentor for success, regardless of who they're going to mentor.
Right.
And some of the dynamics of culture can influence, how you respond in a frustrated situation, or what does it mean tone in your culture versus another culture, right? So there's like these intricacies that eventually can create tension, and I think that's where a lot of initiatives are trying to figure out how to get it right, especially in industries that are dominated by a particular race or color, right? And so that's something that we think a lot about. How do we educate, how do we make sure that there's right wraparound support for when you need to bring in someone to be an intermediary, to be like, hey, you're having this issue, how do you make it be more objective versus subjective? And that's something that I personally am really fascinated by, especially when we think about education and teaching and what it means to be a Black or brown teacher in a classroom that's mostly Black and brown versus not, right? So those are the things that I think about, because adults have different, so there's adult sets of learning, and then there's like children learning principles, right? Children, and that's called I'm going to be tested here. Was it pedagogy? And I believe the other term for adult, if anyone want us to look it up, there's a term for it. But
Right.
3 principles of adult learning. First, it has to be relevant to them. You just mentioned how you turned your academic life around because you finally felt something was relevant to you as you were a young adult.
Right.
Second, you have to have clear expectations. You have to know if you do X, Y awaits for you. And then the last one, I forget, but it's very different from being a child and learning just for fun. You go look at the clouds because, wow, yeah, no, it's cool. I see my son looks out the window, and I'm trying to focus on getting us where he wants to go. He wants to talk about the experience and what he sees, which is fine. But that's something that we forget sometimes, that in boot camps and workshops, you got to have something that they're going to be able to take out and apply to their life, right? So I think apprenticeship, when done correctly, meet all the criteria, because you're saying, hey, if you learn this, you're going to get this pay bump.
Right.
Hey, be careful with this, because if you cut that wrong wire, you can get hurt.
Right.
And you know what I mean? So these are the things, but I think the motivation piece for me is what really has surprised me in the way you share your story. Can you share a little bit more about now? So fast forward now.
Right.
What are you up to? What motivates you? We talked a little bit about your motivation, but what are you up to now?
So, like I said, I'm very interested in being able to cover the skills gap here in Miami. Like I said all
Skills
the time.
gap.
Yeah, I'm born and raised here. I love what the city was. I'm excited about what it can become, but we have to be honest. Importing that top talent has caused a lot of problems. It's raised the property rates, it's raised the amount of inflation that we face here.
Yep.
People aren't ready for it. And then, somebody will tell you, well, just go learn how to code. That's not enough, because now you take on a 16-week coding course and you're still going up against a computer scientist. So now what? Like,
Yeah.
who is the company going to pick? It's not their fault. It's like, we didn't grow up in a system where we were learning about coding or computers early on. I don't know what we were learning about actually as a city.
Yeah.
This is a place where we focus on tourism. So outside of service-based business in that sense, we weren't prepared for this.
Yeah.
But one thing I do know, we were always building, and we were always entrepreneurial. So my program, once I got in, I'm like, I'm telling everybody how to code for free, how to do all this stuff. But even when I tried to code, I'm like, man, it took me 3 weeks to set my atmosphere up and my computer up to even code. I'm like, yo, this terminal thing is harder than coding,
right?
But I talked to a young man, and he was asking, how do I get into technology? How do I get into technology? And he wasn't necessarily interested in coding. And I said, what do you know how to do? He said, well, I used to work on houses with my dad, or he was a construction worker. So you know how to use a shovel, right? So before AI can be mass adopted into all these different systems that we keep talking about, we're so excited, the infrastructure has to be there for that to even be possible. And we have to revamp structurally how this country is ran.
Telecommunications, fiber optics.
So fiber optics is a subset of electrical work. And a lot of my skills apply there, but I'm also certified to deal with fiber optics as well. And that is one of the biggest and highest demands for technicians moving forward, outside of the plumbers and electricians, because that's all new infrastructure that has to be redone.
Wow.
And he said he can dig. Well, guess what? We have to lay new fiber in all these locations that don't have high-speed internet.
Right.
And that's not going to be 2 months. It's not going to be 2 years.
These are big projects.
This is going to be 20, 30 years. Before I left FPL, we were hardening the system. That started when I hired on, and that just recently ended. But now it's the secondary system.
You're talking about almost 15 years.
Right. So now you have to go into the backyards. What is the main problem during a hurricane? The backyard.
Wow.
A wire falls down. You're out longer than people who have their power on the front street. So that's going to be the next objective. That's going to take 10, 20 years.
Wow.
So before we can even, become the Jetsons, we have to have the systems in place structurally. If AI is going to control something so important that it's going to be life or death or something like at a hospital, there's going to have to be a system set up to where the lights do not go out in the hospital. If a computer is monitoring something so important, or something communicating as fast as the lights go out. So this is where we come in with electrical and fiber optic.
Right.
And we want to be a part of that system of just building the new. But, we focus on not just how, but why. Because I've always been a science person, a nerd. And you can't just tell me how. You need to tell me why. And I was always interested in, as an apprentice, why is this doing this? Why does that work? Why do we need this level of fusing versus that level of fusing? And I said, I'm going to put that into my program because that gives you the opportunity for growth yourself.
Yeah. Fully see the whole 360, not just do it because a book or something is saying that's how you do it.
Yeah. You should work for me because I run a great company, not because it's the only choice you have. But if I become a huge company and you've been there 10, 15 years and you think you got it, why not become a contractor and also come work? It's the same amount of work needs to be done.
Yeah.
And now you can serve the company as a contractor, gain a little bit more. And now you can go on and teach people, have something established for your family, your own firm, something you might specialize in. So
you look back, saw infrastructure as a big play, which infrastructure in the U.S. is a big topic.
Yeah.
The broadband minimum speed is absurd. What we say is the minimum a school should have.
Right.
I go to a lot of schools. We need help.
Yeah.
A lot of times it's because in South Florida, you're capped on how deep you can dig, or really that's probably tied more to money than it is like how you can and the cost of it, right? And so you are creating a company focused on infrastructure, telecom, and then creating an apprenticeship that basically is based on a lot of the things you wish you had in place
Right.
when you were going through that
That's
journey.
how we take it to the next level. So I'm out of a good system. I've never knocked FPL and say it wasn't a good system. It was a great system. But, as we move to the
Iterations, you
future,
can always
you
find
always
ways.
add on and you make processes better. There's still gaps in waste.
Yeah.
I learned Six Sigma at FPL, so that taught me about waste and eliminating the gaps and what changing 2% of waste can do on $10 billion. It sounds like 2% doesn't sound like a lot until it's billions of dollars involved. So, again, like even with Go Sprout, you don't even understand how much of a great system that is, because a lot of the apprenticeships are running on very, very dated systems.
Yeah.
To where there's waste in between there,
I have a friend who started a company. He originally was just helping buildings and homes. He was replacing like toilet, the part for flushing, and saving X amount of water.
Yeah.
And now you apply that to a condo. Now you apply that to a whole neighborhood. All of that adds up. And now he's turned that into an even bigger entity, doing that for every opportunity where there's like you can save on whether it's electrical or water. And so it starts with a focus. It starts with building it out. How can the community help you? What phase are you in, and what can folks to kind of get involved and support this great initiative?
So right now, I'm definitely looking forward to get my company off the ground.
Yep.
Starting to do that work. You don't want to just be held to teaching only. I want to take on some of this work because I have some dreams of wanting to hire these apprentices myself, because that adds on to the accountability of making sure that people get jobs. But just let's start looking at how can we get these apprenticeships back into the high school. Starting learning early as possible, learning these engineering concepts. Whether you become an electrician or a plumber, like if you have a solid base, that's going to be easier, because we're living in times now where the economy is global. We can't afford to have barriers like racism, just cultural differences, regional differences, because we will lose to other countries that have a stake in what's going on globally now. You look at a country like China. They dominate 70% of the battery market. So we've lost that race. We're trying to catch up in semiconductor chips. They're trying to catch up in semiconductor chips.
Right.
So we get most of our chips from Taiwan. Now that's a bottleneck. That endangers us. That endangers some of the stuff we have to do. We can't afford to miss any opportunity to improve ourselves as a country, right?
That's a really interesting point, because over the summer we hosted a boot camp style program for high school students who were interns, and they were learning different things tied to, and I got to show you the curriculum. You probably recognize some of it, but radio antenna, some Raspberry Pi.
Yeah, I remember that.
You remember that, right? And so that was tied to a project from the Department of Defense. So our poor, I don't want to say we have a poor, but our inability potentially to train people is a national defense issue, right? It's a national defense crisis. That's what you're trying to say, is that not having the systems in place. And so I think we might need to make that workshop too in the future. But that's really interesting how you do the knowledge gap and what that means for us as a country. Can you go to the next one real quick, Chaz? Because I want to talk a little bit about, so in this case, we talked about the apprentice. We understood Dontrell started when he was in high school, right? That was his exposure. And some of his friends making bank who didn't go to college went a different path. So when we think about some of the different types of apprentices, this is how we've kind of categorized them. Seekers, explorers, career changers. And so a lot of times people think it's only the younger high school, but if you've done a particular career for a long time and you're looking to change into another one, an apprenticeship is a great way to do that. Mozart, think about a little bit about you, right? You've been doing X, you're probably thinking about changing to Y. This is a great, because it's a job from day one. You can't necessarily one can't just jump into something, a boot camp, pay $15,000 and take 16 weeks off. That's a bad combination.
No, it's tough.
So not everybody can do that. Next one, Chaz. Next, I want to get to the one where we show the process, the new timeline that we did. Yeah. Okay. So we zoom out, and we're going to open it up to some questions after this. But I wanted to zoom out to this slide I'm gonna have to stand up so I can guide you guys through it. You don't have to talk about, but on the process of creating a program. So we heard from an apprentice, the employer, the company FPL. They wake up one day and they say, hey, I want to create, let me get back in focus here. I want to create a lineman registered apprenticeship program. This is the when a bill becomes a law slide that we did. So you say, you know what? We don't have enough people who are in the pipeline to become linemen, and we just got all these government contracts. What do? I'm going to create a registered apprenticeship program. So I'm going to first say we want to create a lineman. That's step one, identify the need. Step two, to your point around standards, I look in the Department of Labor's database. I pull out the lineman occupation, which for the most part is standard. Maybe something changes based on where you are. Maybe you do more fiber versus non-fiber, et cetera. But you look at that database and you grab the standards from it. You put that into a document that says, this is the journey for 5 years. This is what they'll make. This is what they got to learn. And this is you as an employer typically, or you can be getting help from a sponsor. You submit the document to the apprenticeship training representative. In Miami-Dade County, it's Lorena Vasquez. She's amazing. She's been here. She's come to our event. She's been super supportive of the apprenticeship work we've done. And so that's where, if you think about Don Charles starting his program in, what's the occupation specifically? Like fiber optic technician, maybe around, right?
Fiber optic.
Electrical. So here we are. We created it. We did that. We looked at the database. We submitted it. Now comes the part where you wait for them to say, okay, Dontrell wants to start this registered apprenticeship program. She's going to work with you. You might go back and forth a few times to identify certain things, check the dots, right? Okay. Then it gets approved. Normally it takes 2 to 4 months to get approved, but you get a certificate. You say this is a registered program. It's almost like what it would take to open up, in a school in a sense, right? And you say, here you go now. Congratulations. Here, shake hands. Congratulations, your program has been approved. But as Dontrell mentioned, the trickiest part is now that journey, you got to monitor it. You got to make sure that learner that's also earning, so that's what it's earn while you learn, is getting the support they need. And this is where Go Sprout comes in. Because when we were going on this process and we wanted to create our program, we were like, this seems very like they give you the program and then you kind of like have to figure it out after that. But that's the most important part now. You got to actually intentionally help this person learn all those skills and so that's where the platform comes in, and that's what we've now signed on. We have 14 partners we've signed on that we're working, and one of them is a big solar company in Georgia. We have a electrical company in Puerto Rico called Luma. We signed up hot off the press last week, New Smyrna Utility. I don't know if you know those folks up there. And so we're finding some niche in the energy space. We should talk more. But we have IT companies, because this works for IT specialists, cybersecurity, AI, machine learning. So all of those occupations really require the same framework. Next to someone who knows, following a curriculum, learning a long time, getting paid as you do it. And then when you finish the program, around 92% of apprentices stay with the employer who hired them. So it's actually it's a win-win for everyone. But as you can see, this journey, many people are like, nah, I'm good. It's a long process. So I'm going to pause there. Did you want to share any closing thoughts, anything we didn't really cover? We can do some Q&A.
No, I mean, again, when I spoke about the fourth industrial revolution, when I was younger, it was a documentary came out. I think it was like a mini doc on the first industrial revolution in America that built the Vanderbilts and the Rockefellers. And that was like one of my favorite documentaries, because it was like, man, I love business. And it's crazy to see that they had this kind of opportunity to, blow up.
Timing, basically.
Right. And it's like, I learned so much about business and what my approach to business would be. And I knew one day I'm like, man, I'm going to be this big CEO, doing battle with all these other companies. But I'm like, if only I had that shot to catch something new, like catch oil while it's new, or catching railroad while it's new, but that's never going to happen. And, when blockchain kind of broke out and I understood how to apply that to my industry, because we're not just focused on apprenticeships, we other services for industrial and utility companies, like how to make them better, like a product like this is in that same vein. I'm like, one day I woke up and I said, is this the opportunity that I've always wished I had? Like, and I just
It
started
was like right under your nose,
and
right?
I'm like, man, God is amazing in that way to where, you know, I was learning that stuff when I was 18, 19, with no clear signs of it being applicable to anything. And then, boom, just the pandemic hits, and now we have another shot at it.
Wow.
And this can be so formative for different communities.
Yeah.
Right now to build wealth, because again, like the part of whether you believe it or not, if race or anything was a factor, now that's been removed because we will lose as a country. So we all have the same stake in the game.
Right.
So that's the most exciting part about it. Like, we all have to win together or we'll lose. So what we're going to do?
And I think that's why the push is on registered apprenticeship, because it levels the playing field. It creates entryways that it's a job first. So anybody, and in my way into this, I didn't share my story, but I was a professor, still teaching Miami-Dade. I had a student, single dad, was about to fail my class. And he came to me and said, if I fail your class, I lose my job. And I was like, damn, why? Because I'm in an apprenticeship program. This will be my third time failing it, and they take me out the program. And then we talked, and he was like, yeah, I can't do class any other way. I got to work. I got bills. I got a kid to feed. And then I just got kind of obsessed with the model, because I felt that if I was a professor and I would have known that he was an apprentice, I would have been a little more present with him. He passed, obviously, with me. And then the return was, tell me what would have made your experience as an apprentice better. And a lot of what he shared was something I felt I could put into a structured process.
Right.
And so that's where Go Sprout was born. But I'm going to open up some questions from you guys. If anybody has any questions in general about apprenticeship, or for Dontrell or myself. What's up, y'all?